We're dashing through a musty building, blasting old bats, mummies, and ghouls. That means we're either running amok through a retirement home, or we're playing Kid Dracula on this episode of Doki Doki Game Club. Hello and welcome to Doki Doki Game Club, a retro video game podcast. I am your host, Brandon Fincher, and I am joined today by the other illegitimate sons of Dracula, Frank Raculard Martin.
How about you?
Brian Dacular Grogan.
Hello.
And Mr. Joseph Ladurak Luster.
Whoa!
On Doki Doki Game Club, we each take a turn choosing a particular title from video game history, and we announce the selection online so everyone can play along at home. From there, we have 2 weeks to spend with a title, at which point we reconvene to dig into the ins and outs of the selection. Today's pick was made by Joseph, and the title is Kid Dracula for the Nintendo Game Boy. Kid Dracula was released in Japan on January 3rd, 1993, exclusively for the Game Boy. As a spin-off of the Castlevania series and a sequel to the 1990s Famicom exclusive Akumajo Special, Boku Dracula-kun, it was both developed and published by Konami. Releases in North America and Europe followed that same year. All right, my dudes.
Yo.
Let's talk about a baby vampire.
Yeah, the little baby vamp.
Yeah. So let's start, as we do, touching, holding, feeling, loving, about the topic of the history of Kid Dracula. So, Joseph, let's kick off with you because, you picked this.
I chose it. I put it upon you to play this game, so it's my duty to kick things off.
Yeah.
Had you played it before?
I had actually never played it before. I played a little bit years ago of the Famicom version, which, this is kind of... It's like a sequel and kind of a remake, I guess. Or not remake, but like a port. It's like basically the Game Boy attempt at putting Kid Dracula in the palm of your hands.
Mm. Was it Famicom only? There was no NES version?
Yeah, there's no NES version of the original. So
okay.
There's no
but there was a Game Boy version.
Yeah, over here. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they brought it. They brought it out in English here.
Weird.
Yeah.
I had no idea until you said that we were going to play this on the Game Boy, that there was even a Game Boy version. I mean, that wasn't like a pleasant surprise or anything, because I mean, when it comes to Game Boy games, like if there was an NES version or if there was an NES title, there's a really good chance that there's a Game Boy version of it.
A subpar Game Boy version.
In a lot of instances, yeah, like a mediocre port. But I had never heard of it, strangely enough. I mean, I guess since we're talking about history, I love me some Castlevania.
Oh, yeah.
And I always have, and it's almost so talked about at this point. It's such a beloved franchise that, there's really no point in, harping on about Castlevania. But despite loving it, in all of my years of, I guess, emulating Famicom games, I had never played the Famicom version, never played the Game Boy version that we played for this. So it was like the whole thing was like a new experience to me. I'd seen art like that. That's a pretty iconic image.
Yeah,
of
like the cover.
Of Kid Dracula. But for whatever reason, it was like my brain just didn't put two and two together.
Well, the whole reason I picked it is basically that, because I know that, just from knowing you guys, I know that we're all... Castlevania fans, but it's not exactly like in the show's spirit, I don't think, to be like, hey, let's have an episode on Castlevania 3 because everyone in the world's played that, right?
Right, yeah, there's almost no point, really.
Yeah, it's like having the same conversation that a billion people have had, and rather than doing that, I just thought, let's play not only Kid Dracula, but let's play the Game Boy version because, I mean, the real reason is because we haven't covered a Game Boy game, so I was like, this looks as good as any to cover, and it looks reasonably like the NES version or the Famicom version as far as visual quality on the Game Boy goes. It's not like the Mario sprite on NES versus the Super Mario Land sprite,
right?
So I thought it was a good pick, but yeah, I had no experience with this really other than that.
Yeah, for me, it was literally the first and only time I've ever heard of it. I've never seen the box art. I've never heard of it, and because I never owned a Game Boy really when I was a kid, and I never really took the time to play any Game Boy games as an adult. So
yeah,
it was.
Well, in most instances, you're not missing much. I'm sorry to diehard Game Boy fans, but yeah, I mean, like I said before, if there's typically a better Nintendo equivalent, not necessarily of the same game, but I mean, you can have. I don't know. We'll get into the Game Boy-ness of this title in particular.
Compare this to there are other Castlevania games on Game Boy, and they vary in quality greatly. But
Absolutely.
Generally, they're a way more like Castlevania on NES is already a pretty slowly paced game as far as walking around goes, and they somehow ratcheted that down even further for Game Boy. So yeah, it's not the place to go for your first experience with the franchise for sure.
So yeah, I was in pretty much the same boat. I am really limited experience on the Game Boy. Never had one. Very few friends.
You guys didn't go on road trips when you were a kid?
No,
I had one. If it makes you feel any better, but like I think back on this isn't going to be like a Game Boy. Let's reminisce about Game Boy episode. But I mean, I can't even think of more than maybe like a half a dozen games that I ever owned for it. My favorite probably being Gremlins. Of the bunch. I mean, I played a lot of Tetris, obviously.
Of the batch.
Hey.
Well, like I had a Game Boy. I had like 3 games. I had Pokemon and I had King of Fighters. And
weird, boy. Yeah. What kind of port must that have been?
It's bad. And another fighting game. Like I had 2 fighting games and Pokemon is what I had. So
that's why you never played many, because you were like, oh god, if they're all like this.
Yeah, exactly.
So Brian, did you have any other thing to say?
That's pretty much it. Like I haven't, but yeah, I was vaguely aware that there were Kid Dracula games, but I didn't realize there was a Game Boy one. So
there wasn't ever a Super Famicom or anything else. It died on the Game Boy. Yeah, okay, that's a shame because I like it. I didn't hate it. So.
All right, well, unless you guys have anything else historical to talk about, I say now it's time for the Back of the Box.
His pearly fangs drive the girls wild, while his dead of the party sense of humor makes them scream. He's Kid Dracula, star of the mythical Transylvania 92010. And the coolest living corpse ever to stake his claim on Game Boy. If you thought Mario had a way with magic, you should see Junior Jugular's spellbinding powers, including the mesmerizing bat transformation. Poof! Nobody wings it better than Kid Drac.
All right, so with that beautiful retelling of the Back of the Box, I say we kick off. I'd say let's maybe dig in with, as we do, a game summary. Joseph, let's hear about Kid Dracula in a nutshell for those who've never played it.
All right, I'll break it down real fast. It's Kid Dracula. You take the Castlevania brand of platforming, inject it with chibi-style sprites, and shrink it down for Game Boy, and you have something to really sink your teeth into, if you know what I mean.
Blah. Well done. Yeah, that sounds about right. I know we've kind of got some talking points here, and you mentioned the chibi thing, and those chibi style sprites. For me, I mean, I've got some thoughts about the gameplay we can dive into, but maybe let's talk a little bit about the look of this game.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'm really, really impressed. I'm a sucker for like cute anime, believe it or not. Most people that know me would probably be like, what? But I don't know. Like something about the look of this, like it's so well done. And if you look at the Famicom game that this is sort of loosely a port of, it does the same thing. And this game, as far as Game Boy games go, like it looks great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of the thing, though. Like you have these really big sprites that I mean, this is more on the gameplay side, but it doesn't leave a lot of room. Like if you look at the Super Mario land,
it's a much bigger or
the play area is
broader level design.
Yeah. So like the pixels, the percent, the screen real estate for what you got, it's really zoomed in, which it does look great, but the gameplay.
Well, it's kind of like the damned if you do thing about Game Boy visuals, though, because
exactly
if you're actually playing this on a Game Boy, which I know none of us were,
I was playing it on a DS.
Okay,
So,
well, just imagine playing this on the no backlight, or
Yeah.
if you have all the accessories. Maybe you do have the little light on the front and the magnifying glass and everything. But imagine playing it on that, and I think at least it's very readable as far as like that that's concerned. But yeah, you do sacrifice. It's kind of a tough game to. Visually, it looks great. It's just tough to see things coming at you a lot of the times because of that.
yeah.
Yeah, totally. And I think this is a good opportunity. I mean, you mentioned the sort of the experience of playing this on a Game Boy. And, as I was playing this for the first time, like I really tried to keep that in context of like what this game experience must have been like, compared to a lot of other Game Boy titles, or at least like I said, the handful that I remembered. And I mean, considering that, it's one experience, but if you just kind of take it on its own merits now, as sort of like, I mean, I guess like depending on who plays this game, they're obviously going to have different points of view. But I mean, I think it's safe to say that the people listening to this podcast and we collectively as a show, we love old games, and so we have a certain tolerance even for old games that we maybe didn't grow up with, don't necessarily have any nostalgia for. I mean, if anything, it's weird because Doki Doki Game Club it's a retro video game podcast, but we don't really deal in nostalgia, like because a lot of what we're playing for the first time.
Yeah.
So I mean, there may be nostalgia in the visuals, but the experience itself, it's not like everything's clicking into place. And so I tried to keep that in mind when I was playing through this. And I guess compared to a lot of other Game Boy games, it's pretty good. It suffers through a lot of things that I feel a lot of Game Boy games suffer from.
Yeah.
And that the controls, and we can kind of talk about that later if you want, but like they're not as tight and crisp as you might get with an NES or something else from that era. I don't know. Anyone else have any thoughts about like the? I mean, were you mindful of that as you were playing through this? Of like, this is a Game Boy game, so do you need to? Did you feel it necessary to make certain concessions? Is maybe a better question.
Not
like
really.
Well, I mean that.
Yeah.
I mean, definitely as far as like, I was like, oh, it's going to be a Game Boy game. It's probably going to have like, pretty crappy graphics. But gosh, the characterization and like a lot of the enemies, it's better than like you had like some very Mega Man-ish enemies in there.
Oh, yeah. And we'll get more into that later. I've got some Mega Man thoughts. But,
but we've got, like monochrome, and a lot of these, they put a lot more detail into like anything that you'd find on the NES even.
Even like when you destroy enemies and you get that kind of like cartoon comic book poof
thing,
that's a lot more than you would get in most Game Boy games, I think.
Yeah, to me, from what I've seen, is like there's a lot more attention to detail than would be led to believe, because every enemy seems to be not like half-assed at all, and like compared to like I know we talk a lot about past episodes, but like I'm thinking of like the Christmas game, and like a lot of enemies were just like really like half-assed, phoned in, and like, but these ones are like
the VCR.
I wouldn't say, I mean, I think we'll probably get around to talking a little more about enemies in detail, but I wouldn't say that this game is completely exempt from that. I mean, there are definitely some enemies that I was like, okay, well, I mean, that looks a little weak.
But I mean, they could have just been lazy and just made cheapy versions of Castlevania enemies. But there's not one Castlevania enemy in there.
Oh, that's not true. I mean, you have Frankenstein.
Oh, well, he's a boss.
Skeletons.
I mean, there's skeletons. There's the sort of platform knights. I mean, they look slightly different.
Yeah, I don't know. To me, they didn't seem like Castlevania.
The art style wasn't ripped off. Maybe the idea is, but not the art style. I wouldn't think.
Definitely not.
Yeah, because this has like UFOs and like witches and like.
Well, that's a little. Yeah. Well, I got comments on that. I'm not
but okay,
sure.
What that makes me think of though is like this is a good time to mention the Castlevania aspect of it, and I think it's kind of only really there in the first stage, which is
totally.
It's kind of like Dracula's castle or whatever.
Yeah, there's like a clock tower or whatever, and
it's almost like a mashup. It's like they got all their Castlevania yayas out in the first stage, and then they're like,
totally.
And then they're like, let's move on, let's just have fun, let's try and parody a bunch of things. Like you've got like Gamera is in the game, like
that's amazing,
around, right?
Yeah. But that's what I mean. Like there's like auto scroller levels that you would never have in like Castlevania like that, like going off rails and stuff, and like.
Well, at no point does this game play like a Castlevania game.
No.
Yeah. I mean, like, so if there are any comparisons to be made, it's certainly aesthetically and only loosely, just because you can look at a Frankenstein's monster and go, oh yeah, that's Frankenstein's monster. Even though, and I know we're going to talk about enemies later, but boy, I love the bow and the side of the hair on the Frankenstein's monster. But yeah, that's like you said, it's all kind of it's all contained into that first level, and then they just sort of do whatever it is they want to do. And I like that, because it's not Castlevania. At no point when you play the game do you go, oh, I wish I had Vampire Killer, like you're shooting and blasting and stuff. But to kind of reel it back in and keep it more about the visuals, the game, like you said, once you get past that first stage of it being Castlevania-ish, it just gives the developers or the sort of sprite designers, the art director, a chance to like spread their wings and like, it's just so full of weird things, and it only like barely keeps a macabre aesthetic. I would say
almost.
Yeah. I mean, there's some things like between each stage you have a like a shopkeeper that you interact with, who like she's not even a shopkeeper, she's like a game like a game person.
It's like a game genie.
She's like a game genie, a game witch.
Yeah, she's essentially
but
a game witch.
I bring her up because she has kind of a witchy, like a sexy witch aesthetic, and then you kind of see some other things throughout. I don't know. I got my brain hung up on sexy witches now. I can't think of anything else. But
you got your helper skeleton head.
Exactly, right, and then a sort of cloak. That's a great design.
It was also
too.
sexy, by the
this.
way. I mean, it depends.
Very much so. Yeah, skeletons in your bag.
I was under the impression it was death.
Oh no, I don't think so because and I don't know. We can make this about the enemy designs or whatever, but you have a death fight. I mean, if you compare that fight to death in any of the Castlevania games,
I guess
it doesn't look anything like death, but it is a character with a giant Reaper side.
Yeah. It's like a witch mixed with death. It's almost like those two, like the shopkeep combines with the skeleton dude, right?
But he does, because that character doesn't have like a skeleton face, so I never really, I don't know.
Yeah, I think I'm hung up on the Reaper side thing. I suppose, the connection.
Death comes in many forms.
That's true. There's a stage, stage 3, I think it is has a bunch of witches that sort of fly over and like drop stuff on you. So
cute chibi witches.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing spooky about them.
No. But it fits with the whole aesthetic of the game, though, right? Like it's Castlevania in quotes. So like
it's like a Halloween playground, more than Castlevania.
Yeah. Well, I mean, visually speaking, this game appears to be a continuation of the Japanese tradition that's sort of put into place by games like Splatterhouse, Wanpaku Graffiti.
I was totally going to bring that game up.
And this feels like as good a time as any since we're kind of on the look of things. But yeah, I mean, people haven't played that. It's the same sort of approach. So this is inspired by Castlevania, and Splatterhouse Wanpaku Graffiti is inspired by Splatterhouse. And so, you got a prominent character from both games as the protagonist, and it does just the bare requirement to keep the connection there, and then sort of just goes off on its own tangent. However, Splatterhouse is a lot more.
Splatterhouse is almost like a remix of Splatterhouse, with the chibi characters.
There's a lot of cartooniness to it.
And they like do it's basically like a parody almost, I would say, more than that. And I was kind of expecting Kid Dracula to be more of a parody of Castlevania.
I was too. Yeah, I mean, I wasn't expecting things like aliens and
it's very
giant
alien
boss fights and. Okay, so now I say we kind of poke around a little bit into the mechanics of the game, and I'd say as far as platformers go, the mechanics of this game is definitely something that sets it apart. Like, I mean, I've talked about gimmicks, and a lot of the platformers that we've covered on the show before tend to have some sort of gimmick, and this is no exception. So at the beginning of this game, there's a gag, like a joke about Kid Dracula forgetting all of his vampire magic. And so as you play through the game, you go about remembering how to do certain things
conveniently after each stage.
Yeah, exactly. And so, who would like to kind of just give us a rundown on some of those, maybe your favorites? I mean, there's quite a few of them. I suppose we could list them all off briefly, but you have a lot of power-ups in this.
Yeah, I mean, you start off with probably the most Castlevania-esque power-up, which is to turn into a bat.
Well, actually, you start off and depends on your definition, right? So you get that ability, so that's the first thing you unlock. But you start the game off as Kid Dracula with a fireball attack, which is something that Dracula in every
that's
Castlevania
like his Mega Buster
has. Yeah, exactly. And so here's a funny anecdote. As I played through the game, I think I got it wasn't when you get the bat move. What's the third thing you unlock?
It's the one where you shoot the. It's called attack, I think, and it's like a
bats
row
going
of bats
to
shoot
attack
out.
bats.
Yeah.
So it wasn't until I unlocked that in my playthrough that I became aware of the fact that you needed to charge. You needed to hold the button down to do it.
Oh yeah.
And so it wasn't until much later that I realized that holding down normal would give you the charge fireball.
And it's a must.
It's so weird. It just completely missed me. But
that's also how you get coins in the game.
Yeah.
Exactly, and I had no idea until 3 or 4 stages in that I was like, man, she really has a high asking price for to buy into these little games, and I was like, man, how do you get these coins? Is there a whole bunch to this game I just wasn't finding? But
I never realized that. I thought it was just
okay. Well,
random.
I don't feel so.
Well, it wasn't until the end stages when I had the bomb and I was using the bomb shot a lot. I was like, oh yeah, these guys are giving coins all the time.
Well, just to kind of like explain that to people real quick is the witch that we were talking, the sexy witch that we were talking about earlier.
That's right.
Between levels, she says, "Do you want to earn more coins? You don't want to earn, or do you want to earn more lives?" And doing so costs coins. So the way
it's like buying into a game.
Yeah. So the way you buy or earn coins in the game is if you hit enemies with your charge shot, then a coin will pop out off of their corpse. Like when they poof away, you get a coin. So
yeah.
But if you just kill them with like normal shots, they won't.
Yeah.
Right.
So in the shop, you have to there's basically a roulette game where you bet on, you bet on the numbers and. Mm-hmm. Spins back. I didn't really mess with that too. I mean, I messed with that. It was like, it's just a luck game. I'm not gonna.
Well, I looked into. I tried to see if there was any way to cheat the game. Mm-hmm. Like if you waited until a certain, because it's roulette in that the marker. So there's like a little marker, and it goes around a circular board, and it signifies being on a particular number, much like roulette, I guess. And you place wages, like you make bets on which number it's going to fall on. And depending on which number at the bottom you choose, the buy-in for that number is more expensive than some of the other ones. So you up it to wherever you want it to be while this number is moving around, or this marker is moving around from number to number. And then you hit start whenever you're finished placing your bets, and then it speeds up or goes faster and spins around the board, and then it slows down. It's kind of like Wheel of Fortune or something where you spin the wheel around. But yeah, so I was really hoping that there was a way to go, okay, if you click on one of the numbers at a certain point in time and hit start, then you could guarantee to have it land every single time. But I did it a bunch of times and I couldn't find any way to fake the system out. Did you guys spend much time playing any of those games? Because it's a thing it gives you to do, like an extra little thing, right?
Yeah, because I found that game wildly confusing. So I never touched it again. But as I got about halfway through the game, you can choose these. If you notice the crystal ball that has the game you want to play on it and follow it, then you get to basically choose the game you want to play. So I found one called Jump and Pop,
Yeah.
And it's like the D, it's letter D. So if you choose the D crystal ball, and you get to play Jump and Pop, which is basically Kid Drac on a pogo stick. And he has to...
Wait, what?
Yeah, and he has a helmet with a spike on it.
With a spike on it, and there are these balloons above you. And the light-colored balloons give you 1-ups, 2-ups, or 3-ups, or maybe even more. And the dark-colored balloons make you lose time. So all you have to do is basically only hit light-colored balloons. And I would get like 9-up at a time. And by the end of the game, I had like 30 lives.
What?
Yeah, it's awesome.
Okay, so I thought... Okay, so when you see like the sexy witch...
Yeah.
She just has 2 options.
No,
right?
she has.
Yeah,
no.
I want more lives.
No.
Well, you choose. I want more lives,
get
and
4
then
crystal
there's
balls.
4 choices from that. Yeah.
Okay. I never spent much time with the I want more lives.
Oh
thing.
yeah, go for that. If you have
one.
at least 10 coins, you can choose I want more lives, and then you get to choose from 4 games.
Got it. Okay. So I think I maybe did it once, but it wasn't the Pogo game. So
Well, the Pogo game's the moneymaker, my friend.
Yeah.
I didn't have much success with the Pogo game, but I did Grab Bat. And she says your dreams will surely come true with Grab Bat.
with a sales pitch like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I got up to 7 up on Grab Bat. So
Yeah, I mean,
I didn't have much luck with the Pogo one. I probably wasn't playing it right.
It's very RNG, the Pogo one, because I know a couple of times I only got black balloons, and I was like, well, okay, because like they kind of go like RNG up back and forth. So sometimes they load good ones, sometimes they don't. So.
Well, so moving away from the minigame section and sort of back to the gameplay mechanics, you make your way through and you unlock these power-ups, and there's some cool ones. I mean, I really like the upward or whatever
upside
it was.
down,
Upside down, yeah. As Kid Dracula, if you charge your shot, basically, like you hold your button down. Was there any other way to activate that besides holding down? Okay, I just want to make sure. So yeah, you hold your attack button down, and it's just like a 2-second beat, and
you start flashing, and then the little kid face gets evil looking or whatever.
That's right, yeah, and that's a really cool detail. While we're on the topic of aesthetics, even though we moved away from it, but the game, keeping with that sort of comedy and like the attention to detail that the game does, you've got a little face of Kid Dracula at the bottom that, like, if you pause the game, he sleeps and snores.
Yeah, and he actually audibly snores like a kid. Yeah. I never had a Game Boy. I could see myself being ratted out, like, no, I'm not playing a game, and then the kid starts snoring.
But you hold down the start shot, you get an on-screen indicator in the form of a flashing Kid Dracula, and then when you let off of it, whatever the weapon or the power-up happens to be goes into effect. And so with the upside down thing, you'll flip up to the ceiling. What's the Super Nintendo game where you're like in a robot suit and like you do that same sort of thing? Like you'll step on a platform.
Well, there's Mega Man in Mega Man 4.
No, definitely not thinking of Mega Man
5.
Yeah. Anyhow, so the game, does a decent enough job of giving you obstacles that you can avoid.
Yeah.
And little platforms. I think that power up becomes relevant on the pirate ship stage.
Maybe I don't remember.
I think that Actually, that's I have this written down. That's the first use of the upside down technique. So
okay, yeah. So it's cool, and like you kind of you got some spikes to avoid, and all sorts of things.
And the boss of that level uses it too. So that
you
was
have to
cool,
use it. Yeah,
cool fight.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Any of those other power ups that kind of stand out? I mean, a lot of them are just like attack based.
Bomb.
So like
bomb is the shit.
Bomb.
Well, the bomb's great, but it just kind of like supersedes his regular attack.
Yeah, that's all it does.
It's like,
right.
My favorite one was that attack bat that does kind of like a circular kind of bat motion upwards. And
it's such a short range though, and I don't know. After I moved on to other things, I never went back to it.
It's purpose.
I like the idea of.
I was gonna say its purpose is very like specific. So like I know in the second level there's like those flowers. There's like a row of flowers that you have to hit, but there's stuff falling on top of you. So like it's perfect for that. And there's like a chicken boss that is like on top of you.
The chicken boss.
Is really good
if you watch that, so if you search on YouTube for the assisted run for this game or any sort of speed run, the first thing that comes up is like a little 20-minute video, and when you see him in action with that or that tool, the AI of the tool in action, it just completely annihilates that chicken in like 2 seconds.
Yeah, because I think every bat does an attack. I think if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. Well, so power-ups aside, what do you guys think of the general platforming of the game, like the mechanics of moving and jumping?
To me, it's better than Castlevania because there's you don't have that floatiness to you in midair. So like I feel it's a little bit tighter than Castlevania, but
man, you need a trigger warning when you say something. I mean, it's apples and oranges.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's not the same thing, but like
I'm fine with you comparing it, but it's to me it feels like a completely different thing. Just in
definitely,
general, though, I mean, when I think of Castlevania, I know there is a lot of platforming in Castlevania games, but for whatever reason, like that's not like jumping. I mean, falling and dying are things that I think of when I think of Castlevania, but I don't necessarily think of
a platforming.
Platforming. I think of it like as an action game where you kind of have to strategize your approach to
an action game where there's unfortunately platforming.
Yeah. But that's the thing, right? Like, because this game is a lot of platforming. There's like level 2 is like you jump on logs and like stuff like that.
Right. A ton of it.
And
it's more platforming than anything.
Yeah,
like a run and gun shooter with a whole bunch of platforming.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that works really well with the controls games because like it's kind of not as tight as it should be, but it's still pretty tight and stuff like that. In my opinion, anyways, I thought it was pretty good.
As I mentioned, I hadn't played the Famicom version of this game, but the watching some of a playthrough just to kind of get a feel for the differences. I mean, it looks like a faster paced game.
Yeah.
The weight of the character as they sort of move through the stage definitely looks different. And that was kind of like my big complaint was, everything has to be balanced according to Mario when it comes to platforming.
For sure.
And, I just felt this was like a little stiff. I don't know.
I think it's because of the refresh rate, because I think on the NES you have a higher refresh rate on the monitor.
Sure.
So on the NES you can get away with faster screen stuff, but I think on this they were pushing it. Like I think that's the limitation of what they could do.
Well, no, Joseph, you played. I know you played a lot more Game Boy games than the rest of us. Do you have? That's kind of a basis of comparison. Do you feel that that's a fair assessment that Frank's making?
I mean, yeah, I think that this is, the frame rate and everything is usually pretty low in Game Boy games, and they kind of have to compensate with the platforming if they're well made, and I think this one does.
Yeah.
To a degree, I think they've kind of catered the platforming to Game Boy, so I didn't think. I thought it was like it straddled the line between being stiff and loose. You know what I mean? Like it was just fine enough to get through the stages, like without too much trouble. But yeah, it's not like the best platforming.
No,
but I do think Frank's dead on about just like the general makeup of the Game Boy making dictating how this was done.
Yeah, because the sprite work is almost the same as the NES version, or I guess the Famicom version. So it's just kind of blown up to maybe double the size of the NES one, because I think the NES the levels are a lot wider, right? And like everything seems to be
the character is smaller in the context of the stage,
and that probably adds a lot to like feeling faster as well, because you can see a lot more. So in this game, you're kind of secluded to this little play area, and you're also moving very slowly through it, I think, to maybe compensate as well for how short the levels are, because like you can get through a level like really fast. Like some of them are pretty compact.
Well, that's actually a good opportunity to sort of point out the pacing that the game I guess takes on. Like, so at first you can get through a stage, so stage 1 is super short.
Yeah.
And I kind of like the way that the game, I'm sure there's some sort of technical limitation as to why they did this, but I like the way that they divide the stages into segments.
Yeah, it's like little vignettes
that are sort of like bookended with Kid Dracula like coming to the end of it and then doing like his vampire cape.
Yeah, it's like a little
flutter thing.
Yeah.
And then he gets like this like great little expression on his face, like I don't
smug.
know. It just
very fluid animation on that cape too. Like I was very surprised when I saw it. I was like, oh wow.
Well, with the animation of Kid Dracula's hair too, as he's like jumping, like coming down from a jump, like for a Game Boy game, I was like, wow, that's something.
More than 2 frames.
I really consider that to be Yeah, the star of the show, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, do you think the those little bookends or whatever, those, I mean, I thought that those were kind of also shout outs to Castlevania, the way they divided those stages, right? You know, like right before
like coming to a door and like having it do the whole,
wait for it to open.
Fake animation thing.
Yeah, I think it's also like, okay, well, for the RAM size of this level, we only have this much. So what are we going to do to make it, feel like it's ended and then move on to the next one without having to be too jarring? Well, we just end it and he just does his little cape thing and it's over. Like, it's perfect.
Right.
Yeah.
I love Castlevania. I consider myself to be a pretty knowledgeable guy as it pertains to the lore of Castlevania. I mean, Frank can attest, I spent a bunch of time like researching Castlevania lore about a year ago for a project I was working on. And I don't recall. I mean, Kid Dracula is obviously like a goof, and
it's not canon,
like separate thing. It's not canon. But is Kid Dracula supposed to be like just like Dracula Jr.
Alucard,
or is it supposed to be Alucard?
No, I just have this note. I just have this note in my notes. It just says, "Is this Alucard?"
Yeah, I mean, obviously that's dumb.
I don't think it is.
Or is it like James Bond Jr., like where he was like a cousin, or is it Dracula when he was a kid?
I think it's just Dracula as a kid because they don't mention.
Well, no. There's mention in the text of Dracula, of your father. As a matter of fact, at one point in the game, you get one of your power-up moves is Dracula's umbrella.
Oh yeah,
and the whatever he is, like the little henchman, refers to like taking care of your father's umbrella. Like, be careful with your father's umbrella.
I guess I didn't catch on to that, but yeah, I guess
the whole time I was thinking, I was thinking about Interview with a Vampire with the kid that got turned into a vampire. Right? Yeah, exactly. No, but he had like the one kid that was turned into a vampire
as a kid, and she
never
just
grow older.
Yeah, she just forever became a kid. Yeah.
Right. Well, I mean, also to sort of refute the idea of him being just a young version of Dracula, there has to, at the very least in this game world, be an older vampire, because I believe it's stage 1. There are paintings on the wall. Of Dracula.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know.
I guess he's like Alucard's, illegitimate brother, I suppose.
Yeah, I hope you love my fan fiction, and you can subscribe to my newsletter at.
That's our other podcast.
Yeah,
yeah. Stay tuned for the Doki Doki Game Club Network, where I start a slash fic.
Yes, I can't wait.
Alucard Kingdom. So how about stages in general? Like, was there anything in particular that you guys, any stages you really enjoyed? We talked about how the game, does its Castlevania thing in stage 1, which, is nice and familiar, but then it goes in some really strange directions.
Yeah.
So
like stage 2 is very Kirby. It has like these trees with faces.
Totally.
Yes, I wrote that too, and the music even is Kirby-like.
Is it? Yeah,
absolutely. I hadn't even thought about that really until you guys pointed out, but it definitely is.
Yeah, it's very nice. I enjoy that level. I think it's cool that because like the trees open up their mouth and like they kind of suck you in a little bit and stuff like that. And they have like, I'm assuming those enemies are the fleas.
Yeah, I wondered that too, and that's one of my favorite, my favorite little enemy designs in the game. Because there's like these little guys and they're perched up on platforms. They don't jump around like a nuisance,
no,
like flea men, but
they throw knives at you. They throw little daggers, and there's owls that are really cool. I don't know. That level was, I guess it would be level 2 for me. That one stands out to be pretty fun.
Maybe they're Grant from CB3.
Could be, yeah. I mean, he definitely doesn't look anything like him, but the dagger tossing and the sort of hunchback positioning definitely seems like a thing.
Also, that was, after watching a video of the Famicom version afterwards, that is like immediate. The first diversion from Famicom is that there's no, tree, forest, Kirby-like level in that one.
Which is weird because there's a definite Castlevania has a long history of forest stages.
Yeah.
Is this the Mad Forest?
I mean, maybe. I don't know. It could be. Maybe it isn't. It's the same stage where you get these that weird little flower. Is that like a race? Like, what is the purpose of the flower
Nothing. They're
at
just
the bottom with the sunglasses?
Impeding you. Like, that's all it is.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really strange. But yeah, so there's like a giant sunflower that is a bridge from one side of the forest to another, and you have to blast this sunflower in the face and get like a great little, pained animation out of his face as you blast him. And and then it'll like carry you across. And as that's happening, you've got giant black beetles like popping out of the tree, and then owls like swooping in and trying to get you. But none of it is quite as frustrating as it sounds.
Well, the reason for that there's one below it, I think, is just in case, because you can fall off the top one.
Can you?
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
Yeah, like the top one, I can't remember. It might have disappeared, or like I did something and it like I basically lost it, and I fell down on the second. The second was like a safeguard, so you have one more chance to get across the level.
Interesting.
Yeah,
I guess maybe in playtesting they found that like some people would fall off and they're like, okay, we'll just put another one. I guess.
Yeah.
So if you get hit, you fall, and that's kind of just so you have like basically 2 hits before you're
insta
falling out of
death
the trees or something.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I know we didn't mention it earlier in character design and stuff, but I kind of want to bring it up, and because we're talking about some bosses and stuff. But I was under the impression, because you guys only mentioned the Famicom version after I finished playing the Game Boy one, and
I know where you're going.
Yeah, and then the first boss, I thought it was a ghost. I thought it was just
nope.
Exactly, like a guy in a ghost costume.
Yeah, and then you guys were talking about something about the Famicom version, and I was like, what? And then I looked up at the speed run, and it's just straight up a KKK guy.
Straight up swastika emblazoned on his forehead.
Yeah. And I wonder, and looking back, I'm looking at the speedrunner right now. That boss level, that boss is inside of like Dracula's like throne room.
So do you think? I mean, I guess that's Dracula's throne room, and that
you go up.
You're Kid Dracula. You should be there anyhow. It's got some of the beats that a Castlevania Dracula's castle would be. But between each stage, you have a sort of overworld map. And if you notice, like when you get to the final level, it's a castle.
So you maybe start off
like,
somewhere.
does he go from one castle to a?
But
it's
but
not
that's
Dracula's
a space
castle.
castle.
It's the other
That's
guys.
King Garamoth's space castle.
Space castle. Okay, all right.
Okay.
That clears that up.
Yeah, of course.
Of course.
One thing, since you mentioned that boss, one thing that's funny is so the bosses in this game, they tend to have multiple forms. So you'll kill one, like a really fun jingle will play, and you'll be like, oh, it's dead, but then it'll come back in like a different form. So it's so good. But that first one, it's in the Famicom version. It's just you fight a KKK guy, and then
you fight
one. And then you fight a slightly larger, well, actually a
much larger,
substantially larger one.
Yeah, he's like 3 times the size.
But what's funny is in the Game Boy one, to the Ghost version of him, adds a third form, which is like it's like small guy, large guy, then old guy. And then basically the old guy just runs left, runs right, and then gets so old and tired that he dies.
But
so you have racist little ghost kid, racist dad, racist grandpa.
Yeah, but it's funny because obviously when it came stateside, they obviously took that away. Like it made sense.
Obviously.
Yeah, obviously they're not going to keep.
I can't even believe because it's so obviously
a swastika,
a Klansman in the when you put the swastika on there in the Famicom version, and like that feels even taboo for Nintendo of Japan.
Yeah,
I know like they've got stuff where they leave in cigarettes and sexual references, but like I can't think of any other like hate figure like that.
And usually, like I'm assuming when you're designing a game, the first boss is usually the boss that you think of the first, right? So their first draft of the game, they're like, oh, let's have him fight a KKK guy. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, it's so bonkers, and really, it only aids in accentuating like the absurdity of some of the design choices in the game. It's like, oh yeah, nobody likes KKK guys, right? So let's have him like shoot the KKK guy with the
fireballs,
with Dracula fireballs. Yeah, it'd be fine. I just thought another instance of Nazis from Nintendo would be, of course, Bionic Commando.
Yeah.
But also, like, this, it's not like this is, someone might say, if they're just hearing this, be like, oh, maybe it's like, like the Japanese, like, manji. But it's not. It's because it's on, like, a Klansman. So it's definitely a swastika.
No, it is not a Buddhist symbol.
It is not,
sure.
It is not a ghost of the Buddha symbol. Because one, Japanese people don't see ghosts like that because they have, like, a different version of ghost.
Totally.
But, yeah, this is definitely a Klansman. But it's funny. I don't know. I just thought I'd bring it up because it's something that stood out for the series.
Oh, no, that's a perfect opportunity. And it actually segues into, I'm excited to talk about just enemies and bosses in general. And I think that my favorite boss in the game, and it sort of ties into the Splatterhouse reference I made earlier, which is
Jason.
Stage 2's boss, Jason Voorhees, of the Friday the 13th
Yes.
fame.
With a shotgun.
Yeah. With a shotgun,
right.
which is a thing I don't think he ever used, but that's fine. And he's in a cabin, which is great, and explodes out of the door and tries to kill you. He goes over and attempts to pull an axe out of a chopped tree stump. It's just funny and enjoyable. Like he's got these great big chibi cartoon eyes, and then a hockey mask and a bald head and the whole nine. And so it's just like, oh man, this game is really it's
funny because the boss fight kind of goes like he shows up, he doesn't attack you, he just runs over to the axe, he slowly takes out the axe, you not kill him, but you harm him, and then he gets distressed. He runs inside, grabs a shotgun, jumps on the roof, and starts shooting at you.
It's like you mess with
It's important not to overlook the detail and the distressment of poor Jason, because he's like crying as he like runs back inside. Like
he's very distressed.
Funny because he actually he looks a lot like the sprite used for Splatterhouse 1 Paku Graffiti's Rick.
Really?
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. How about any other enemies or bosses that really stand out to you guys?
I really like the alien one, because so this is the level that we all hated because we talked about it, but so it's a tube and there's like these little platforms that they're moving at different levels at different speeds, and you got to platform up this thing as it's going up, which is very confusing and very.
It's like a Metroid escape level.
Yeah. I was thinking about that.
And then all of a sudden, these little astronauts show up and robots and stuff like that and whatever. But but then you get to the boss and it's like this huge I don't know what you would call it, like a Sentai boss maybe.
Yeah, it sounds about right. I mean, it's kind of that's fair.
Yeah, it's like a dragon with a laser stick, and he shoots lasers out of it.
Yeah. Well, you have a cutscene, which I know you skip past, but you do have a cutscene with that guy. Like he comes into like a television frame.
Okay.
And he's like yelling at Kid Dracula and his skeleton minion.
So is it assumed that you're in? Well, it is assumed that you're in space, but are you on a spaceship or something? Does it?
It's
I guess you're taking an elevator up to the stars, all the way to the moon, a moon elevator.
That's what you're doing. But also this, I think, if I remember correctly, this is supposed to be fake King Garamoth.
Oh, it's a robot version of him.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
But the weird thing is that it seems like a lot of effort because you never actually see real King Garamoth. You see like a character that doesn't look anything like that at the end of the game.
Yeah. Well, you find like a super powered version of him, I guess.
Yeah, but he doesn't look anything like
I suppose.
it. Yeah, I don't know. It seems like a missed, like they tried something and it just didn't work out.
But yeah, to finish that boss, why I like it so much is that when you figure out that it's not the real him, like his head explodes and then this little alien comes out and he's like, oh, and then
and he's like so poorly drawn. Like he's just like such a simple little sprite. Like he's just got these two dead eyes and like this like weird little bulbous head.
It's so good.
Playing.
I just wanted to briefly mention, so we're talking about this sort of weird moon elevator stage, and man, I really found that stage so frustrating at first because that's the point in the game that the what's the word I'm looking for here? That the balancing of the game mechanics show how poorly how floaty and kind of stiff and inaccurate the movement is in the game, because man, there are so many opportunities where you hit the roof of the next platform and like fall to your death, and it's like not hard and it's just cheap and
unforgiving.
It's you have to do the level like 5-6 times to get the timing right because you have to wait for certain platforms to drop at a certain level and
Yeah, and that's what's kind of like BS. Like, there's no way anybody's doing that in their first try. No matter how good at video games you are.
Yeah.
Like, it's just not happening.
The timing is very unintuitive. Like, it's not like a normal video game where you're like, oh, boom, 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 you got the pacing right. Like, the pacing is all off, and then all of a sudden there's enemies on platforms that you have to attack before you jump on, but you only have a small window of time to jump on it before you insta die.
I feel like they established this also, like this kind of need to memorize the levels early on. Like in level 3, the roller coaster stage.
Yeah.
It's there's a lot of for just to explain this for anyone who dared not to play this in the week leading up to this episode. It's like you're on a roller coaster. It's like an auto scroller, and you're riding on these 2 little platforms, and they're kind of the same platforms as this space elevator almost, but they're going around on this roller coaster, and you have a split second to react to enemies that come at the little flying cameras and everything.
Yeah.
And it's going to take trial and error. And there's a lot that's like due to the limited screen size and the large sprites and everything, there's just a lot of trial and error in this game.
I was looking at the NES version or the Famicom version, and it's little Shinkansens. It's little it's like a railway system
on like the platform that you're jumping on, like during the roller coaster stage?
Yeah, if you look at it on the NES,
awesome.
there's like little windows on it, and it looks like a little bullet train. Yeah, and
that's awesome.
But yeah, it's weird, but I thought I'd mention that, and it's interesting.
Interesting.
Well, while we're still on the topic of, I guess, stage design, I guess it's the last stage of the game. Is the last one the one that's Super Mega Man?
Yeah, it starts with a vertical drop, and then it has the gravity arrow ascent afterwards.
Yeah.
Through all the spikes and everything.
Yeah. And it's just like, it's basically Wily's Castle in terms of like the visual look of it. I don't know. It just seemed funny. It was like, oh yeah, well, to me as a kid, and this is just an aside, but like Capcom and Konami were always like the 2 powerhouses. Or at least they always made my favorite games. So I would definitely say that's probably the first time in the history of my playing video games that like that era where I became aware of like a company. Like, I wasn't just playing Mario, and Mario didn't just come from Nintendo. It was like this other company that makes these awesome games. Anyhow, I mentioned that because it's like Konami making a Mega Man game, Konami making a Capcom game, doing their best at that point. So they kind of throw in some details that you see in Mega Man.
Yeah, like these platforms going up and down and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But one thing that was cool, like as far as just talking about the company in general, is that there are some kind of like cool references throughout Kid Dracula to other stuff. Like there's level 6 is it's another space level, but it's with the one with all the fire, and it's kind of like almost Gradius theme.
Yeah, very.
Totally.
Yeah, with those flares, like those solar flares.
The flame arcs come out.
Yeah, I thought that was I thought the exact same thing. That was a nod to Gradius.
Yeah,
and also in that same level, there's a good use for the umbrella, and it's also kind of Gradius themed, where the volcanoes in the background spew rocks up.
Yeah,
and you have to...
Right. Oh yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
But then it still adds its own little flair to it, in that those little rocks that get spewed out, like they're sort of anthropomorphic, and that like they've got little faces, and like once they hit the ground, they kind of run at you. And, definitely, it's sort of its own thing.
And you can use and that's like, because one of the, I think you mentioned how you have Dracula's umbrella earlier, and at first it seems like, oh, this is kind of unfair. All these things are falling down at me and weird patterns, but you just have to hold your umbrella up.
Yep. There's a good strategy, and I don't know if you guys experienced it when you were fighting that moon stage. I don't know what else to call it. It's kind of like a moon stage where you fight the alien boss, like the Sentai guy that turns into the alien. Because one of his moves is like he tosses out a series of like grenades, I guess, and it was like kind of difficult to avoid them unless you were like right up on him and missed the entire arc.
Yeah, you had to get right. You had to get right
out
next to him. That's what I did, at least.
Yeah.
But
yeah, well, another way to avoid that is to switch to your umbrella and then just like tank the attack, and then you can switch back to bomb
and just bomb them,
and kind of blast them.
That's
with it.
Genius.
Yeah, it was another way that that's actually the way I beat it. So, unless anyone has anything else they want to talk about in regards to sort of stage design or enemies, I thought we might use this opportunity to talk about the music of the game.
Yeah.
So fans of Konami will be aware of the fact that Konami Kukeha, and is that how you say that? Kukeha?
Kukeha, yeah.
Kukeha, yeah. The Konami Kukeha Club are the credited composers of the soundtrack to this. And this game, much like its approach to its stage design, flirts with Castlevania music at the beginning and then gets away from that and does its own thing afterwards.
Because on the first impressions without playing the game, I was like, oh, this is just going to be like, little remixes or even just like straight ports of NES. But there's no, it's just one little melody in the first song is a callback and everything else is brand new.
I thought that there was a second one, and I wouldn't swear by it, but for some reason I thought that there were two songs, and the second one, it might have just been me projecting onto it, but it was a lot more subtle than it just being... Was the first one Vampire Killer?
I don't remember the...
Bloody Tears?
It was a remix of Beginning, which we'll get to in the power line, actually.
Okay, yeah. Whoops.
Spoiler.
The... Spoiler alert, yeah. No, but the music, it really brightens up and gets playful and fitting of the art style of the game, and it's pretty successful. I mean, there's some pretty memorable tunes. I kind of thought about DuckTales at certain instances in this game, with another instance of a Konami versus Capcom situation, but. I don't know. Did anyone else get a DuckTales vibe? Not just about the music, and Stage 3 in particular, when you're on those little bullet train platforms, that music to me sounded the most DuckTales.
I don't know.
I don't know if that song is fresh enough in your head.
I can't think of it off the top of my head, but...
maybe we can throw that song in here at some point so people at home can understand what I'm talking about.
I would say so. Konami is known for more kind of rocking stuff, and this was more bright, more Capcom.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
There's definitely an instance of traditional Konami rock tunes in this. We talked about that moon stage with the tunnel or the vertical tunnel elevator, whatever you want to call it. That music sounds totally like a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles track to me. It's not as good and it's not as long. It's sort of repetitive, but that sort of driving, chuggy guitar riff that all the great Konami. I guess that was Konami, right? Ultra.
Yeah.
It's more or less the same thing. Yeah. It kind of had some hints of.
In fact, I think it was an episode of Retro Game Audio, our homie podcast that let me know that was just set up because it was almost like a shell company because they could because they could only produce so many games.
Gosh, if you haven't listened to that Capcom, if you're listening to this podcast and you even slightly enjoy video game music, that's a great first episode to listen to. I mean, it's massive, it's long. They go through every single Capcom NES soundtrack and play you a track from each. But man, it's great. Highly recommend that. But
wait, was that the Konami one or the Capcom one? It was the
Did I say Konami? I totally meant Capcom.
Oh no! You said Capcom. I didn't know which one you were talking about because I was thinking about the one where they talked about Konami being Ultra Games.
Oh yeah.
No.
It's a separate thing, but I felt the need
listen
to
him.
Listen to them.
Listen to them.
Do yourself a favor. Listen to them both.
Yeah, just listen to them. Period. Just go check them out.
Yeah.
Any other tracks? Any other songs from the soundtrack? Really,
I don't know about specific tracks, but I will say I think I personally did the soundtrack a disservice at first because I was so keeping my ear open for little hints of Castlevania, not paying much attention otherwise. But once I kind of took it as a Kid Dracula soundtrack, I was like, this is actually a really, really good soundtrack. Especially, it just sounds really good on Game Boy and everything. So
yeah, totally.
Great job.
And Game Boy's definitely of all the portables to come before or since has such a good sound chip built into it. I mean, there are musicians, contemporary chiptune musicians, who have built entire musical careers out of using its sound source. So definitely, it's definitely they're in good hardware hands, so to speak. When they chose.
I definitely think it's also the interesting thing about Game Boy as far as soundtracks go is it's amazing sound, but in the wrong hands, it's some of the worst sound.
Yeah.
So just when you hear the pros the Konami Kukeha Club work their magic on it, then it's just you realize the potential of Game Boy.
Yeah. You can see that. This is good. There's definitely potential on that for sure.
While we're on the subject of music, and I know we kind of talked about some of the, a little bit about the Famicom game. I haven't played it. I haven't even finished the entire playthrough or the entire Let's Play that I had started watching. But I wanted to mention, since we're on the topic of music, that there is a vinyl release for people that like physical media from Ship to Shore Media, and I'll make sure to include a link to this in the show notes. But if you like listening to your music on vinyl, there is a Kid Dracula soundtrack available from Ship to Shore.
That's awesome.
And and it looks super cool, and like it's got great sprite art on it. And the vinyl itself, if you're a sucker like me for colored vinyl, it's like a black with blood splatter on it.
Oh man.
Very cool. Definitely should check that out. Okay, so I think we've kind of plumbed the depths of Kid Dracula for the Game Boy, and I'd say now is as good a time as any to do a sort of summary judgment of the game, and maybe do a little good and bad on a particular aspect maybe that we liked more than others, and then something that kind of made the whole experience a drag. Let's maybe we'll start with Frank this time.
Yeah. My best and worst. I'm thinking, because I was thinking about this today, and like, there's nothing really bad about this game, at least in my opinion, because I enjoyed it. Good would be, I think, the animation. I thought that, like, at least with Kid Dracula himself, the animation is really, really good, like really smooth. The cape totally. Swing and like the hair and stuff like that, especially for the Game Boy. And then I guess the worst would be level design, because some levels I'm like, oh, that was it, or some levels I'm like, well, this is total crap, like especially like that tube level and stuff like that. And like Joe said earlier, like you have to take the time to do the level like 3-4 times, the harder ones, to kind of get, like, you have to memorize what you're going to do because it's not intuitive. So I guess that would be my negative on it.
Sure.
And I think my score would be, I'll give it a 3 little bats in an arc out of 5.
Nice. How about you, Mr. Grogan?
Definitely the star of the show is the characterization, the art for all that. Did come with its price of not being able to see how very far away from your character. I would actually say that my worst downfall, I think, is trying to switch between the weapons. Like, just kind of cycling through, and like the weapons just had like it's like 3 or 4 characters to letters to
3 characters
to let you know what it is, and then differentiating from attack and bat and like all that. Like I'm trying to beat this boss, and that was pretty frustrating. And
it's not like like Mega Man that you can push pause and go pick the one that you want. You have to cycle through like 3.
No, you can.
Can you?
I think you could.
Oh well, I mean, you can pause it and cycle through it, but
I think you could. But I mean, that was a pretty a drag on the experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
But so overall it's fun. It just had had its downfalls, and that's part of the medium as well. So I'll give it 1, 2, 3 out of 5.
Very good. I'm going to go next, and then we'll save Mr. Lester for last. So, I found the experience to be a little tedious of playing through this game. I'm not going to lie. Like, there are things I like about it. I love the charm of the overall charm of the presentation. I think would probably be my favorite aspect of it, the visual presentation, maybe with music as a close second for the 2 best things about this game. But the controls and just the game itself, I mean, it's probably just an accumulation of kind of not as responsive as I would like mechanics, and the the poor sort of stage design options that they had at their disposal. I don't know. I mean, it's not the case with all the stages, especially like some of those. They do some ambitious things. Yeah. So I don't think it's necessarily a hardware limitation because there are plenty of Game Boy games out there that I have to assume at least that compensate for that, whereas this game just kind of throws these big visible sprites at you, but doesn't really, there's just a lot of stuff that you can't see coming at you. So there's my good and bad. And I'm going to rate this game 2 out of 5 sexy witch game shopkeepers.
You dirty boy.
Well. And how about you, Mr. Lester?
Well, I'll start off with the bad. My bad is pretty simple. It's just I'm not a big fan of the trial and error gameplay.
Yeah.
Especially when you start with such a limited number of lives. And granted, you can continue, but until you start doing that jump and pop mini game, you might be continuing quite a few times. So I wasn't a fan of that. One thing, I have kind of an unconventional, good part of it is this was one of the most interesting examples of a port that I've seen in a while. I think after watching the Famicom version, I have a new appreciation for this because they put so much creativity and so much stuff that they didn't need to do, not just in bring it to Game Boy, but just in adding new levels. Because there's just so much different stuff. Like even like the Mine stage in the Game Boy version has elements of the Famicom's Egypt stage.
Sure.
There's some stuff that's as small as the level 4 giant robot boss in the Game Boy version being the level 8 boss in Famicom, but then there's stuff like Jason isn't even a boss in the Famicom game.
That's true, yeah.
He's actually there's a later stage that's like a New York kind of stage, and there's little Jason enemies, and I'm like, oh, it's like Jason Takes Manhattan.
Oh, that's
which is pretty awesome. And then one other thing I noticed is that in the Famicom game in Stage 9, you scale this level, and there's a giant drill head robot in the background that becomes kind of a boss. And nice. Then in the Game Boy version, that's just there's just drill head robot obstacles that you dodge. Yeah. So it's like a lot of cool little touches, just kind of them doing what they could with Game Boy and making the most out of it, and not just trying to do a carbon copy, to make it a lesser game. Yeah. And I loved all the Konami Easter eggs too. And one thing I wanted to note that I thought was kind of fun is that I don't know if this was the same in the Game Boy one because I didn't get a good look at it, but after you beat that Sentai boss, he leaves a giant coin behind. And in the Famicom version, though, the coin has Ebisumaru from Goemon on it.
No way.
Oh, nice.
So I thought that was a cool touch. But yeah, I just like all the work they put into this little Game Boy port, which could have been way lazier. And
for sure.
And I will give this a 3. Why wasn't there a giant hopping garlic boss in this game out of 5?
All right, so there you have it, folks. That is that's the ratings, our good and bad. And now, as you're all probably chomping at the bit to find out, where can you get this game? Well, it's a Game Boy game, so there's never been a digital marketplace for Game Boy. But if you're a collector and you want a piece of this physically, a nice piece of physical media for yourself, you can pick them up used. They are pretty steep. If you check out pricecharting.com, they have the loose card of this, which is probably the most common of the bunch, available. Going rate's about $71. And then, of course, anyone that's ever bought a Game Boy game or considered collecting a Game Boy game is well aware these things all came in these cardboard boxes that just have been annihilated over time. So it's pretty expensive for a complete box version. You're looking at $541, and if by some miracle you come across a brand new version of it that's all shrink wrapped up, you're looking at $568, which strangely enough is not that much of an increase, which leads me to believe that it's just probably not very often that
just get the new one
arises.
Yeah, get the new one.
Yeah.
Treat yourself.
And yeah, absolutely. Just splurge. You work so hard, you deserve it. So, all right. And so, without further ado, I'd say it's time for Doki Doki Powerline. That's right, it's Doki Doki Powerline, where we plug you into the source for the hottest gamer tips and tricks. The winner of this episode's Powerline Pro Tip comes from our good friend Sandra, who she writes in with some Kid Dracula tips, and I do believe Mr. Joseph Lester is going to read those for us.
Sure. So she actually has some good tips, tricks, and an FYI.
Whoa.
So let's go through. Number 1. During the first boss fight, you don't have to hit the third phase of the boss at all. Jump over him, and eventually he'll get winded and fall over, and you'll have won.
Nice.
Number 2. The Stage 1 BGM is a remix of Beginning from Castlevania 3 Dracula's Curse.
Hey, there you go.
And 3, a little FYI for you. Up Fireball is your friend.
Yes.
Yes, it is. All right, so thank you very much, Sendra, for writing in with that Doki Doki Powerline Pro tip. We want to give a shout out to Sendra. She's got a project she works on. She is the editor-in-chief of originalsoundversion.com, and they cover all sorts of great information, including the vinyl release of Kid Dracula. So check it out and read some of her articles. Okay, so that brings us to the reveal of next episode's game. And if I'm not mistaken, this time it is our good buddy Frank's choice. So Frank, what do you got?
This time I'm not limited to any sort of seasonal game. So I decided to go with a very a game that I've always wanted to try. And I never did because I never owned a Virtual Boy. So we're doing a Virtual Boy game called Jack Bros.
All right.
So there you have it. Get your hands on a Virtual Boy wherever fine products are sold.
Jack into your rig.
That's right. Get your Jack Bros together for the Virtual Boy. And we'll be back in a couple of weeks to play that one. And that concludes episode 7 of Doki Doki Game Club. Before we bamf into a bat and bolt from this broken down belfry, I want to thank my cute but creepy co-hosts for joining me today. Who are you guys and where can people find you?
I'm Brian Grogan, aka Ken O. You can find me on Twitter at Ken O Shinobi.
I'm Frank Martin, and you can find me on Twitter at Hios_IO and on Twitch at Hios_.
And I'm Joseph Lesser. You can follow me on Twitter at Moldilux, MOLDILOX. You can check out my website, subhumanzoids.com, and listen to my other podcast, Subhuman Gals.
For the Zoids and by the Zoids.
Yes, sir.
If Twitter is your thing and you'd like to follow me personally, I am Genocide over there. That's DJINNOCIDE. And you can follow the show on Twitter as well at Doki Doki GC. In addition to that, we're practically on every other social network online as well, so search for Doki Doki Game Club all across the World Wide Web, or head on over to dokidokigameclub.com for further details. Thank you once again to everyone who continues to tweet about us using hashtag DokiDokiGC or shares a link to the show on Facebook. You're the blood to our fangs, and you give our rotten forms life. And last but not least, we have a Patreon. So if you have a couple of bucks you can spare and would like to show us your support in that manner, you can head on over to patreon.com/Doki Doki Game Club, where we have some pretty neat rewards available to anyone interested in supporting us in that fashion. So, on behalf of Brian, Frank, Joseph, and myself, thanks for listening. And until next time, adios, Battletoads.